Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live stream of today. Yeah, I'm super excited to be
Everybody.
here today. It's been some time since we've been here, and it's been some time since Philip been here with me. Philip has some time off,
Likewise.
and now he's back, and super exciting for that. And you should expect to get some uh, new videos by Philip. By the way, did you know that Philip video on YouTube that compare RBAC, ABAC, and ReBAC has more than 1,000 views? More than 1,000 people was curious about the difference. We never believed that, right? Who care what's the difference
That,
between RBAC, ABAC, and ReBAC? But yeah, sometimes the
yeah,
life is
that's true.
yeah, sometimes actually I think it even more than 1,000, but we started too soon, right? Let's present ourselves to the audience. So, welcome everyone to the monthly demo office hours. You name it. We know we don't want to put too much names, so we just call it permit demo. But today we are here live to talk about the permit new pricing model. I think it's super exciting, and we have a lot to say about it. And if you've been here because you met us at KubeCon and really want to, really curious about permit, we'll go through a permit demo with kind of a framework that we're trying to build around how to adopt fine-grained authorization. We'll do everything with permit UI, and maybe we'll dive also to some code. Um, but beforehand, a couple of announcements. First, we are live, but we are also recording itself, so you'll forever remember the way that we just talk nonsense in these videos, and you can watch it later. If you sign up to the video, we'll send later the video link on the email where you sign up. So if you need to drop off, just no worry about it. You can drop off and you get us later. If you have any questions, we are always happy and want to answer questions live. And just drop them, no matter where you're watching us. We see your comment, no matter if it's like LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or whatever you're watching. I think also we got on Twitch now. Wherever you're watching us, just know that you can comment, ask questions, we'll answer them. We try to answer live. It also leaves some time at the end of the hour for questions. I just checked, actually, and with me, of course, Philip. I can't believe that you don't know Philip, the developer Philip, who is a developer advocate here at Permit. And the video that we just discussed, the RBAC, ABAC, ReBAC video actually got 1,600 views. It's
Oh
quite new
wow,
video,
look at that. That's pretty
impressive
good.
for our numbers. If you haven't, by the way, subscribed to Permit's YouTube yet, now it's the time. And there is also a QR code if you want to watch the difference between RBAC, ABAC, and ReBAC from the best developer advocate out there. And with that introduction, let's start with our live stream of today. So the first thing I think I'm excited about is the new permit pricing. For the last couple of months, and with all the work we do with the community, we get a lot of questions and people that are coming to the community, they are coming to permit, they want to adopt it, no matter if that's startup founders, indie developers, indie entrepreneurs, people who just creating a platform for doing something, and they really want to have fine-grained permissions from the day one, right, Philip? I think.
You know what? Pricing in general is such an important aspect, and it's very hard to get right, especially when you're a startup and you want to be attractive to other startups.
Mhm.
Now, there was now in general pricing is hard, and then add authorization on top of it, and it gets even harder because how do you track that and how do you do it? We had a great pricing model from the beginning, but now it just became more attractive because now you can just start using permit. We like to say for a cheaper price than buying your Starbucks coffee, and you can get started. So that is definitely something that first of all will be much more appealing to anyone who wants to make use of some of more of the premium features that permit offers, but also gives startups and big enterprises much more kind of clarity into the pricing model and how things work and what exactly they are getting for the price. So I think we did a good job there. I think the whole team kind of got all the ideas together to first of all, not even just to make it appealing, but also make it understandable. Pricing is not just about the actual price that you're offering, but also what you're offering and how you tell the customer and how you tell someone who wants to use the product of how to convey that. And I think we did a good job. So if you want to check it out, you can just check it out at permit.io/pricing. You'll see all the amazing and beautiful UI changes that also went on there. And it's an experience. I can tell you that. It's an experience. And your
Yeah,
unusual pricing page.
yeah. I think that the thing that personally exciting me most. So I started my career as a developer, as a indie kind of entrepreneur. I try myself. It was the early days of CMS and dynamic website, and I built some extensions for back then for PHP, the Joomla CMS. And as a indie developer, I think sometimes you need to do tough decisions. You really want to run fast, so you probably do more buy versus build decisions. But on the other hand, you can't buy too much, right? You need to get income. You can, I mean, the money that you make as the indie developers or indie entrepreneur is actually the money that you live from, right? So you don't want to pay too much. And I think, although permit new pricing is also very good for startups who want to adopt fine-grained authorization from day one, I think the people that I personally, as a developer relation person, waiting to see more with permit is the indie developers that now can very easy get into that. What do you say, Phil? Let take a look on the pricing
Yeah, I
website.
think. Well, I think we've teased it so much that it would only make sense that you
Yeah,
show it to everyone
absolutely.
who's listening.
Great. So let's do that. So here we can see the new permit pricing page. So again, our slogan was like we should start for free and predict the future, and that's the thing that most important for us in Permit. We want to help the developers who is using Permit to predict the future of their usage. We don't want to surprise them with giant deals and stuff like that. And this is why we are keeping our pricing model based on monthly active users. The way that we are measuring the quota is monthly active users. We know some other authorization as a service products measuring by the calls that you do to the authorization service, but we think it's not predictable. One API endpoint can have 5 calls to your authorization service, and API endpoints are growing significantly when you create software. And that's just example. Authorization can be anywhere. So we are billing by quota of the number of the user, and this is the new tier that we have. I think that's the most significant part of the new pricing. We have a startup tier, and it can start from $5 a month. And even if you are scaling to many, many users, you are always getting a really lower price. So look at this quota calculator. If we have even 20K users, which is great for any indie developers to have 20K users, and wish for that, you are paying less than $200 a month. I think if you're looking on other alternative or building it yourself, I think that's kind of money that is not count. So
Yeah, I
correct me if I'm wrong.
I 100% agree. For this price point, I wouldn't build it myself. No way. Actually, let's put this straight. I would never build authorization myself. That's just a fundamental thing. But for this price, it's more
But
of
here you're biased.
yes.
But you say that even that,
Yeah,
it's
even
something that you
even with a price like this, it's something that I would consider. And this is taking me outside of working for permit. I think now we're kind of seeing when you start and you bootstrap a company, just the general principle and the general best practice is to not build things yourself. It's to actually use things that are already pre-built and are safe and are done by a bunch of engineers that are really good at it and they know exactly what they're doing. And just for bootstrapping purposes, obviously, if you're serious about building something, you have limited budget at that point. But obviously, there's companies out there who charge extensive and extortionate amounts for just getting started. With us, you get started for free, right? You have a very extensible free tier that allows you to play with permit, do literally pretty much do everything and make use of most of the features without having to even give us a single penny. And then if you're a startup and obviously you're at those stages where things are difficult and you're still, you don't have for example VCs backing you, and you're going out of your own pocket because you want to bootstrap something to create the minimum viable product. $5, that's really what you're looking at for the basic stuff. If you want even more extended functionality than whatever the free tier gives you. So I think it's pretty good, actually. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. So we'll already say welcome to all the startups that will decide to use Permit. I'll remind you that our free tier stay as it was. Actually, it's even a little better than what it was, because our free tier is now with the same quota that it was. But we open even more features for the free tier. Now we have an official strategy of no blackout feature, no functional feature in Permit. Only operational and enterprise features are around the more expensive tiers, around the premium tiers, but every functional feature in Permit. And now even the early access is on the startup, but um, every single feature, functional feature in Permit is open for everyone. No matter if you are looking for multiple way to model policies, if you are looking to embed policy in authorization interfaces, if you're looking for manage environment, manage shared access, everything here is free now. Of course, in the limits of the quota, but we also let you explore whatever that you want. I said that there is some little changes on the Pro and Enterprise. We downgrade some operational technology feature, operational engineering feature from Enterprise to Pro, for example, SSO, and some compliant and extended log retention. And we keep the Enterprise where you actually need enterprise needs, for example, custom contract, custom payments, on-prem deployments, etc., etc. So with this new pricing tier, we believe that everyone will find themselves the right formula that will help them to never build permissions again. That's our slogan, and we are always sticking with that. Another cool, yeah,
I
go
actually
ahead.
want to add something. I love what we're doing here. I kind of just realized this because most companies, when they change their pricing model, they add to the model, but then they're like, you know what? Let's charge them more. I love how we're just giving more and charging less. That's just what a sales pitch that is.
Uh, Actually, it's Black Friday now. Maybe we'll
Oh yeah,
change that
well,
after.
there you go, guys. That's it. That's what it is.
Yeah, we had some thought if we want to launch it on the day before Thanksgiving, and then one of our American colleagues say, "Hey, just day before Black Friday, so why not?" Yeah, that's the exact time that you need actually to release something that's related to pricing. Yeah, I'll say, of course, for me, for you, Philip, as a developer relations, probably the tier that we meet the most is the free tier, because all our demo is in the free tier. But of
Right.
course, the customers are very soon are going also to some other tiers, and really happy to open the opportunity for some others. One of the things that we added that is very important, and it wasn't here before, is the comparing of the plan. So now you can compare all the plan. I actually work on that table, and I got some criticism that is too long, but I say nothing is too long for customers to be transparent with. So you have here all the factors that is actually you can count on the permit pricing. I'll say that since we have no blackout feature, you can see here that the table, all the checkboxes is in all the type of the tiers. You get all the SDKs, no matter all the integrations that you have, the ways to configure policies, the way to enforce them, the UI, the elements. Every feature is something that you get in all tiers, and here is the detailed quota. I'll say here, I'll share something internal, like insider from our pricing decision. Philip touched it a little. When you're doing pricing for your SaaS or a software as a service product, you actually add some challenge. You want to predict your operational cost. Permit, of course, as operational cost. We don't just charge for giving a salary for Philip and I, but we also have operational cloud costs for sure, and we want to predict them with the price that we are charging customers, charging permit users. But for users, our operational cost is not something that they can predict. So we tried to find a balance. We tried to find a formula. How can we give even startup for a very cheap price a tier that they can work with? And still have some predictability on our operational cost. And this is why we add here some quota on the configuration that you can do on the system. I'll say that this quota didn't came in a vacuum. We take a deeper look on our analytics. No existing users will get hurt from this quota. All this quota is under um, what the users are paying today. And I think the most important part, the authorization queries are always will be with no limits, no matter how authorization query you'll do, is something that you can probably not charge for. And anything important here, as you can see here, the more we go down there, we get more things that are more for the enterprise. But this is, again, all operational and contract-based features. Nothing is related to your permit functionality. I think that's all for the pricing part. Philip, if you have anything to add, I'll be happy to hear about it.
No, I think you covered everything well. I mean, I know that if there's anyone who has questions about this, make sure that you drop them in the questions section box, and we'll definitely address it. And I think if there's no more questions, or if nobody is kind of raising their hands eager to ask anything, we can probably move on to the next thing on your agenda.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much to take a look on our pricing page. And with that, I know the reason we set this meeting, we set it monthly. We are planning to go over the permit features and the new things that came around this month. We did a large launch week last month, and we really pushed the content that we have there. So we thought what we can give for users who is watching our live stream today. And we thought that one of many questions when we've been in a KubeCon, so Philip wasn't in KubeCon, but I've been in KubeCon 2 weeks ago. And if I'm trying to summarize, what are people asking, and what is maybe the thing that came the most when people ask in KubeCon and in general, is about how to adopt fine-grained authorization. I think this question is a question that repeat itself again and again. Like everyone who came to Permit is asking, okay, I understand that I need it, I understand that I want that. Tell me, how do I start? Because authorization, not like authentication, is a problem that is very relevant for the business itself. It's very part of the business decision, the resources, the policies that you model. Everything is part of the of your specific business needs, and it's never something that you can just plug and play. We try to make it the more easiest possible, but it's still something that related really to your network. So we try to think, how can we deliver maybe a framework of fine-grained authorization adoption. And we actually came with kind of 5 steps. We are. I'll say that we are. This framework is something that is built. You know, i- it's not something that lives forever, and something that is active and change from time to time. But I think the 5 steps when you want to adopt inefficient fine-grained authorization. So the first thing is to understand the modeling. Look at your system. Don't start in force. Don't start nothing. Start with modeling. And when modeling, go gradually. From simple modeling, maybe model what you have today, and then go for more advanced modeling. Think about maybe one simple, or model all your simple rules and one complicated rule, and then go with more complex after you start gradually um, rolling this out. The second part is about data sync. You need to synchronize data. Policy decisions are made from policy, but also from a lot of data. And syncing data is something that you actually need to think about. It's something that you need to, it's something you need to design. It's something you need to plan. And that's very important for developers who want to adopt, to plan and understand the data syncs mechanism they're going to have. Then, of course, starting to rolling out queries, more and more queries into the system that enforce permission, that query permission, that filtering permission. Then think about deployment. How do I go to deployment? How do I go to deploy the policy decision point? How do I go to deploy my application into the cloud policy engine? And then last but not the least, do the management. You need to audit, you need to observe, you need to do a lot of that. So what do you think about the
So I want to add to the kind of initial point you've mentioned about understanding your policies, and I want to highlight something important here, because this is something that we see with a lot of clients. A lot of clients come to us, and in general, permissions is something that can be a little bit intimidating, especially when you have a lot of them. And the question is, okay, but how are we going to end up using your tool or working with the tool to actually manage this? And they think that that will be the biggest kind of stopper for them, or the biggest hurdle to cross over. But realistically, what the hardest thing about permissions is for whoever is implementing them, for them to be able to understand their own permissions, and to even then be able to go ahead and actually model how their permissions work, even if they haven't used permit, and even if they set up like their homebrew like permission system. Just modeling something that you have already in your system that exists can be very, very difficult. And that is the biggest hurdle to actually overcoming permissions, is knowing what you actually need, and what the final outcome of that is. Once you've modeled it and you've put it into like a visualization, which we usually recommend, it's like a recommendation for you to do, so you can actually picture it of what it looks like, because it ends up looking like a graph. Then you start to translate that into a solution like permit, and then it's very easy. But you need to understand how to model things, and how to kind of approach the initial steps. I think more on the practical side, if you're looking at implementations, and in general how to think about permissions. Even if you have something that you're just starting with, you can go ahead and just start from scratch. If you have something that already pre-exists, and you're like, well, how do I use this tool to even replace this inside like the technical side, so inside the code, for example? Well, the best practice and approach there is just to, for example, if you're using permit, is to just create your enforcement point. So at any place within the code base, or any place within your application where you're checking for permissions, you need to double down on whether that user can or cannot do something, just to put it very broadly, depending neglectable regarding the kind of policy model that you might be using. The best approach here is just to put those guard points side by side. So you might have something that you've written yourself, or used another solution to do it. Put permit right side by side. And then finally, when you have two of these authorization solutions working, you can actually compare the result. And then you can build your confidence that actually something that you had previously works really well with your new implementation of permit. And therefore, you can then feel secure that actually you're doing something right, and then follow from that, start deleting the old solution, and just fully start migrating to permit. And that's usually kind of the nicest and the smoothest approach that you can undertake, that first of all takes the least time and leaves you feeling the safest, which I think with permissions is quite significant.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great advice. When I'm trying to point on your graph and that idea, I think one of the things that is really hard and that we try to break in our framework, and soon we'll see how also Permit is trying to break that, is the coupling between the schema and your data. The idea of using policy as data and policy as graph, and we actually had in the last live stream, we have with Pauline from Agicap, who is working with a pure Google Zanzibar system. And we discussed a lot about the way of, having decoupling your schema from the data, because the data is today here and tomorrow another way, and most of the modern system is actually working on like event-driven data, so you don't even have the exact idea on the data that you'll have in the system. And it's super important to actually understand the way of your graph being dynamic. You need to develop your permission. You need to develop your permission schema. The permission schema is maybe something that you can visualize as a graph, but you need to be really careful to design the data sync and to design the data itself in a way that will not hurt or not couple the schema of the configuration from the data. And I think that instead of talking, let's take a look on the permit console to understand how we are completely decoupling the schema from the data. Let me share my screen. And here is the development home. So we don't actually really know the exact audience on this live stream, so I'll just go with kind of free form of this demo. Let me go to one of the projects. If you're not familiar with permitting, it's important to mention that permit is very aimed to be fit with the software development lifecycle and built in a hierarchy that makes sure it put the same as your organization and project is actually works. So you see I'm here in the workspace of Permit.io test that actually switch to another workspace. Workspace is like a company. So now you see I'm in the Madrigal Electromotive. Appreciate if you understand the reference. And in this company, we have a lot of projects, a lot of applications. So we have, for example, Pollo Loco, and we have some other applications in this project. Now, seriously, but you can see that you have here some projects, and each project has a lot of environment. Environment can be considered as a branch in your application. Every time that you actually need to develop a new schema of policies or enforce new policies, you can create a new branch or a new environment, and actually work better to create that. So with that say, we have here this environment, and let's create a new clean environment. Let's assume that you're starting a new company, and let's call it new cool startup. And I'm creating this environment, and now let's start with the policy. So the first thing about thinking of policy is the schema. This is one of the, I think this is one of the most significant part for developers who are moving from more static sense of RBAC, of role-based access control system, to a policy-based or dynamic-based role-based access control system, to understand that the rules of what your roles need to do in the system came before what roles you are assigning to the user, and it should be decoupled. Because when you are thinking on, let's say, for example, you have this, I don't know, system where your users have roles, and then you just try to write some code there. So you are deciding in the application what each role can do, and then you create a policy system that is imperative and static in your application. In permit or other authorization, when you externalize authorization, you are creating dynamic systems. So first you need to understand what is the schema? What is the schema that I want my roles to have? So let's think for an example that we have here. Let's talk about application. In application, we have, of course, dashboard, and let's keep it all the default CRUD systems. And then we have, except the dashboard, let's say that we have widgets, right? Which widget has in the dashboard, and let's save that too. Okay, so now we created two resources. That the way our entities anyway is modeled in the system. That's the static thing. That's the configuration part that you are connecting your system into permit. And let's continue with the role-based access control. And let's create a role of, let's call it one called admin, and let's call another one editor, and then let's say analyst, because we are going with the dashboard. And then, for example, we have, I don't know, viewer, let's say. I'm keeping my typos here, so sorry about it. And at this point, we just modeled what we have in our system, right? That's the resources that we have maybe in our database, maybe in our abstract level, maybe that's API endpoint. And we have the roles, which is type of the users. Now, the most important part is, of course, the policy rules that we have here. We need to define rules of what each role can do on every resource. So, for example, here we have an admin. We can say that admin can do anything. Analyst can update, create, and delete. Admin can't, let's say, delete dashboards, and they can do anything on widgets. Viewer can only read dashboards and read widgets. At this moment, we finished with configuring our dynamic system. If, for example, tomorrow some role is changed, some permission is changed, we are dynamically changing the policy here. So, for example, we want viewer also creating widgets. So we click on create, we save changes, and then the policy rule is changed. That's the first step when you are migrating for static-based imperative code that check what the roles can do to a centralized configured policy system, right? So that's the most basic RBAC part. Philip, do you want to add anything on this
I
step?
think I think I think just to kind of highlight the flexibility and the simplicity of transferring all of this data onto the dashboard. If we kind of take a step back and try and mention what is actually happening in the background, every time Gabriel is creating a role or creating a resource or creating specific actions on that resource, and then specifically assigning what each role can or cannot do on that resource. For example, admin being able to create and delete and saving those permissions. All of that actually gets generated as Rego code. In this case, if you're using, for example, a policy engine like OPA. Now, Rego code in itself is not the simplest language to get. It's also not the most developer friendly. So as you can see, this is, first of all, a humongous time saver. And it's also so much more readable than having to look through a bunch of lines of code to actually understand the same thing. So it just really kind of eliminates the complexity here, and realistically, and kind of as to like conclude what actually happening here is it's speeding up your workflow of managing permissions and being able to amend permissions in the future and make them more extensible. So there's a lot of advantages with kind of a view like this and just how those permissions are actually represented.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you can also have people who are not as technical come onto the system, and they'll be able to understand what the permissions of those roles are, right? So it's also available to other stakeholders, not just very technical people who know Rego in this case.
Yeah, I think you summarized it better than I can do. And if we are looking here, we are getting the most simple schema that you can configure. But sometimes your schema is even growing, right? For example, you want to create a complex condition set. Let's say that you want to give a quota for a user, for a analyst, to create up to 3 dashboards, right? So, for example, what you can do is create here a user set of analyst. Let's call it also, we don't want to call it analyst, but let's call it analyst under quota. And then we can have a condition group. The condition group, if you're looking here, we want to probably have an attribute on the user. The attribute on the user is something that we need to calculate, but part of the schema is what are the attributes that the user can have. So let's configure what are the attributes that the user can have. I'll go here to user attributes. We are not configuring the value of the attribute. We are configuring only the how the definition of these attributes. I'm adding here this attribute. And just after that, I can configure it as part of my schema. So I'll create here, I'll say analyst under quota, and then I'll create condition. The user quota is, let's say, greater than and, less than equal to 3. And then we can create one condition set, and we can also create another condition set that say over quota analyst, and let's create another condition group, call it user quota is greater than or equal to 3. And here we got 2 type of quotas. Let's also create free dashboard. We can also create dashboard that are that people can create for free. Let's say that a dashboard that user can create is a dashboard that has an attributes of free. Let's make it the most simple one. Also here we need to define the schema. We need to define the schema of the attribute itself. Let's say let's call it premium, and let's put it on a Boolean. So again, we created a definition on the schema on the dashboard, and here we can also create premium dashboard, and we can say dashboard and resources premium, and it equals to true. Okay, now after we create those, we can get back to the policy editor, and we can, for example, take out the create dashboard from the analyst policy, and we can give it only to the analyst. We added this button here so you can see the whole title of the column. Let's say that we want to give this only to analyst under quota. If we want to be even more sensitive than that, more fine-grained than that, we can say that only that free dashboard is allowed to all the analysts, and only premium dashboard is allowed by only analysts under quota. Let's create this another condition. So I'll create here free dashboards, and then the resource type is, of course, dashboard, and the resource premium equals false. And if we go back here, we even we can say that the analyst, they can't create, of course, any default dashboard. They can create if it's a free dashboard, it allows to over quota and under quota analyst. But if it's a premium dashboard, it's allowed only by analyst that is under quota. And if we are saving here, we are again changing the schema. We can't enforce it yet. So that's the first step when you are actually modeling policy, is defining the schema. We can go even deeper. So for example, we can do the relationship-based access control. What the relationship-based access control, of course, will be about create relationship. Let's create a relationship between dashboard and a widget. And let's create a role that is only in the level of the dashboard. Let's call it, for example, so here, for example, we can give a role for data insert, for events that are going into widgets. So let's give a role for a service. Let's call it event handler. I'm creating the role of event handler, and I'm creating relation. The relation dashboard is a parent of a widget. And then we are saving that. And I want also to give the widget, to give them some roles, so we can create a configuration for all derivation. So here, for what was event handler there, will be, let's call it, let's not complicate it with too complex policies. Let's say it's also event handler. And we are saving this. If you are going back to the policy table, we can see that we are both to the schema. We get the event handler on dashboard, we get the event handler on the widget. Let's do a very cool stuff. Let's say that event handler on a dashboard can't do anything because dashboard is a schema, widget is where the data is. Let's say that event handler has only permissions to update. This event handler is a service, it's not a human. It's a service. The event handler can only update data on a widget. The nice thing is that we can create role derivations, so we can give one event handler permission for all the dashboard, and then they will get permission to all the widgets under this dashboard. This happens via configuration of role derivation. Role derivation is another schema that we can create. We can say dashboard event handler derives widget event handler if dashboard is a parent of a widget. What does that mean? So you can see how friendly it is. You can see the human readable stream here. A user who is dashboard event handler will also user, of course, it could be a service user just for the human readable stream, will also be widget event handler. When a dashboard instance is a parent of a widget instance, what does that mean? They will get the permissions of the widget event handler. So what the permissions they will get to update the widget event handler. And although the role assigned in the data, if the role assigned to them to the dashboard, they will derive to the event handler. As you can see here, everything we do under the policy screen, is actually the schema configuration of our policy. And as you can see here, we can mix and match schemas. We can mix and match roles and relationship and policies. So you can, by using permit, you can very easy imagine to yourself how you'd like your schema to be without before you are planning the data sync. Because if you are need to design everything yourself, then question about data sync: how do I assign the role to this user? How do I create this dashboard in my authorization system? Create coupling that is after hard to lift and shift. By using the step that you are modeling, then you take a deep breath and understand your modeling, and if that's the way you want to go, and only after that, and we'll get to that soon, go to the data that your system need, then you are getting more and more reliable fine-grained authorization adoption plan. I'll say that everything that we saw here, of course, is available via any of our SDKs. Configuration is even available via our, we launch it in the launch week, is via the Terraform. So if you're not feeling good about console UI or cloud UI, I follow you. I really understand you. Sometimes code needs to manage as code, and everything that we configure could be configured via a Terraform provider that support everything we saw. It's really easy to read that. After you are actually doing that, I think maybe the most cool part is that if I'm doing something here and I'm saving the changes, I actually, Permit is generating policy as code for you. One of the hardest thing when we've been at KubeCon, we had Kelsey Hightower in our booth, and when he heard that if you are using Permit, you can use Open Policy Agent, but you don't need to write Rego, he said that's the main thing you need to sell people. Well, we do a lot more than that, but not writing Rego is definitely one of the gifts that using Permit as a fine-grained authorization service can help you. You still get the code. The code is owned by you. The code is owned by your Git repository, and it's generated for you from the very comfortable schema that you can model here. Really easy to understand, no matter if you are using the Permit Cloud or the Terraform provider, you are getting a very easy way to configure and manage the policy schema.
I think on top of that, for all those who might want to have a go at Rego, you're not limited at Permit. I mean, we offer you all the functionality in the policy editor to everything to do for you to do everything that you want. But like Gabriel said, we provide you with the GitOps feature, which gives you the whole GitHub repository with all the generated code, and then on top of that, you also get the functionality of being able to write your own Rego code on top. So if you have very, very niche scenario that you want to implement yourself, you can also go ahead and do that. So the options here are endless. I think one other thing very quickly that I want to add regarding the policy models such as ABAC, the way I think about them. When Gabriel was showing how he's creating the different resources and adding attributes for the resources or adding attributes to the users and configuring that final condition block, the way I like to think of that condition block is literally like working with logic gates. It's like a computer science fundamental. But if you think about logic gates and how you construct them, where you build your essential conditions and then you have some outcome, and only when the logic gate goes through, that policy works. Well, it's essentially working in that same way. You're essentially configuring your logic gates by using attribute values and comparing, or attribute instances and comparing them to values, and therefore deciding how that policy goes through. And that's what gives you more granularity and what gives you more control over your application. Then when you get into ReBAC, obviously with deriving access and the permissions cascading from role to role, depending on how they sit in the hierarchy, whether one role might be a parent of the other, then they naturally might cascade when those roles derive. But again, all those conditions are pictured as a graph. The graph being the nodes and the edges, and how they connect to each other is how those permissions essentially cascade. So it's just kind of a little addition to how you can visualize permissions to be able to kind of more thoroughly understand them, or to at least understand the concepts of how they actually work behind the scenes. And then obviously, once you think about all of that, then you think about doing this at Permit, and then you think about the contrary of actually having to go ahead and write this all yourself in Rego code. Well, I think the choice is clear.
Yeah. So we actually talked a lot about the schema. I want to move to the data, but I see that we have comment. Hey, Vignesh, we are so happy that that's interesting for you. Go tell your friends, I guess. And also I see question from Sean. It's actually an old one. Sorry that I didn't pay attention for that earlier. Sean asked about the pricing. If we just prepaid for a year, a couple of weeks ago, will the new pricing apply to us? The answer is yes. If you want to downgrade to the starter plan, you are more than welcome to do that. Just reach out to us in the Slack. The Slack link is here, and we'll refund your invoice to the gap between. Actually, the Pro is even a little cheaper than the starter plan. It depends, of course, on the exact quota that we have, but for some sort of quota, it could be cheaper. So just reach out to us. And we'll, of course, refund and validate your invoice for everything that you want there.
Sean, do make sure to look into the actual table there, because there are some limitations in the startup plan that don't apply. For example, you are limited to the amount of roles that you might have. So make sure you pay attention to the little bits. But of course, reach out to us, get in touch, and we'll sort you out. That's all good.
Yeah. So now that we understand, let's go to the next and maybe the most exciting step of working with your authorization. Start to design your data sync into Permit. So if you're familiar with Permit, you probably know the directory. The directory's Permit is where you can see all the data. Of course, you can also write data here. Here in the demo that we will just write data here. All the examples is on the Slack. But just to understand, after we configure everything in the schema, and we want to get policy decisions on our oh, my head is really like dry today after all this lunch and everything. But at the end, I'll get to remember of what I plan to talk about. But so if you actually want to do everything from the UI, you can of course do everything, but to get a policy decision, you need a policy decision that is part of here, but you also need the data. You need the users, you need the instances that you want to get, you need the attributes on top of the instances. And this is where you start to design your data sync. Data sync could be in multiple ways. First way to do data sync is part of the check function. So, for example, if we are thinking about the way that permit check function do, let me show that with the permit CLI. I will change the screen that I'm sharing here. The most easiest probably way to pass your data into permit is doing it where you're enforcing the code. So, assuming that you doing a check request, I'll go here to my local permit CLI branch, and I'll run it npm run. Oh, let me do it this way. I'll log out from the previous session. Here I'm logging out, and let me also log in. And it will soon take me to my account, and then we can choose we've been in Madrigal Electromotive, Couchbase, and New Cool Startup. So now I'm logging in with mine, and let's think about how can I do a check function. So we have here the check function with this one. So what you can see here, we have a user. The user has a ID. Here is Gabriel plus Michael. We have the action that we want to do, and we have the transaction. Transaction is also have ID. You need to sync this ID to permit. Of course, you can sync it in the check. In the check function, you can pass the attributes of the user, you can pass the ID of the resource, and you'll get a decision for it. But for most of the cases, you don't see the terminal, I see. Oh, they can
We
see
do.
that?
Yeah, I see the terminal. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird, because when I look at the screen of the live stream, I can't see the terminal. So
It's all there.
that's probably not the best or not the most easiest way to work with your data. Probably want to sync it up. And in Permit, you can sync it up into multiple type of places. If you want, you can, of course, put it in Permit, and then let's see, go to the docs. You can synchronize your data to Permit, and Permit will make sure to deploy to all your PDP, to all your decision point where you are actually using, let's take a look to remind the permit diagram. So here on the top is your architecture, is permit architecture. In the bottom is your architecture where the PDP sits, where your application sits. You can, of course, manage your data directly to permit. Permit will make sure it will deploy to the PDP, but you can, of course, use the data on the PDP itself to sync the data. You need to design, you need to think, do I want the data to be in permit and permit will propagate it to all my PDPs so it will have zero latency, or I want to sync it directly to permit? And then you need to decide the fashion that you want to do that. Philip, you see the diagram? Because
Yes,
somehow I don't see anything in
yeah,
my
we can
screen.
see
It's really
everything.
weird. Okay, so when you are syncing data, you can choose to work in event-driven mechanism, and you can choose to work in API-driven mechanism. In API-driven mechanism, your application is responsible to send data to permit and or to the PDP using our API or SDK. That's the way most of the users choose to do. You can control what you send where. For example, the data could be the users from your identity authentication provider. When you create them, you can work with scheme to provision users. The data could be the attributes on your resource, the ID of your resources, the relationships between your resources. Everything from that fashion is something that you actually can deploy and propagate to permit. Uh, with this checks, you can with this data you can start to do your policy decision. Thanks, Vignesh, for also clarifying that you can see the browser. And the event-driven mechanism, it means that when you are loading the PDP, it's a little too early to talk about the deployment, but when you are deploying the PDP, you are telling us, this is the events I want you to listen to. The permit has the opal scope, which is a mechanism to write Python module that defined event sources. The event sources could be Kafka, could be any kind of event handler that getting events and saving it in the decision point database. This is a little complex because you need to manage it operationally to manage all the event driven, but then you get a fully event driven mechanism system and the data is there. Again, for the demo, let's just back to permit and create some users and resources. Philip, if you want, when I'm changing the screens, if you want to expand or elaborate something on data sync, that's the time.
Yeah, I think in general, syncing all your users into permit might be a little overwhelming. But obviously, there are just simple ways to do it. Just you can just it's as easy as almost writing a script and just pushing all those users, for example, via API to our directory here. But there is actually a little trick that we usually recommend to clients who are especially working with a lot of users. In general, when you have a bunch of unique identities that you need to sync, you don't need to do them all at once. You don't need to go for the hassle of doing that, because at each point in time, when a new user is going to access your system, they're going to have to log in, right? And they're going to have to authenticate themselves. And at that moment in time, that's the best way to actually sync a user. And only when they log into your system, then you can sync them into permit. So you don't have to do a huge bulk in one go and worry maybe about it being too much. And then obviously, naturally, through time, as users are using your system, soon enough, all of them will actually sync into permit naturally. So that's kind of a really nice way to approach it as part of like an event-driven almost interaction with permit. So
Yeah,
I think that's a
that's great. So as you can see, I created two users, but let's also create the event handler, and the event handler, let's assign it to the default tenant. And we are not giving them any kind of role because it actually have access to a specific instance. Here we do not have the instances yet, so I'll not create it now. But let's save the event handler, and let's create another dashboard. Let's say that let's create another dashboard and a widget. So the first one is dashboard. Let's call it dashboard 1. And let's have a tenant of a default tenant, and then save that. Let's have another one, add the instance of the dashboard, and not dashboard, of a widget, dashboard 1 widget. course, again, in event-driven mechanism, it will just go into, and dashboard parent, let's say dashboard 1 is parent of widget dashboard 1 widget. Let's save that. We can see here that we have events with relationship, and let's think about the way our data is working. Here, let me switch to the all tenants so we can see also the, that's weird. I want to see also the event handler. Maybe I haven't saved this user. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think you might have not saved it. Just quit it.
Yeah. So let me save it. It still does not have, yeah, I want to continue without a role. And now we have the event handler user. Now I'm going back to the terminal, and let's talk about how do I enforce permission that I have data. So of course, the most easiest is to do the permit check. So I'll just do the permit check. Let me get the PDP run in my local environment. So I'll do permit CLI.js, PDP run. I'll get here the command to run it in my local environment. Let me clean the screen. Now I can see that I can enforce, I can enforce the permissions locally in my system. And let's start to run a permit check. I have here this check function. The user is, of course, let's start with Philip. We know that Philip in the schema is allowed to delete dashboard, right? Because we are assigning them. We have here action, delete. And the resource is, of course, all the dashboards. I'm writing here dashboard. Let's hope that I don't have any kind of, so I probably have some typos here. Philip, you see the terminal, right?
Yeah. You called it dashboard one, no?
No, I'm trying to check for the whole dashboard, but I think that it was capitalized. So let's, the tenant is Philip. I don't want to pass the tenant because it's on the default tenant, still denied because the dashboard has a capital D, I guess. Yeah, we can see here that Philip is allowed. Philip is allowed because two things. It's allowed because the schema allows Philip as an admin, right, to see, to delete the dashboard. And it also, user Philip has the role admin. So the reason is combined both from the Philip has the role admin, the data, and also that the admin can delete permission. Now let's see how the system became dynamic. If, for example, we are saying that Philip can't delete dashboard anymore. What we need to do if we want Philip to not be able to delete a dashboard, we need to remove Philip from an admin. This is a data change. If we'll remove Philip from an admin and we'll go back and we try to change, of course, we'll get denied. But with this data change, let's say, for example, we want to update because Philip is also an analyst, right? And we want to update a dashboard. And
Gabriel, just I think when you're switching over to the permit policy
oh,
editor,
they don't see it. They don't
see it.
see.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
just
you don't see the
in the
permit.
background, Gabriel has been changing permissions. That's why it appears to be.
Yeah, let me check if I can share. No, I can. I need to replace the screen. Maybe I'll share just the entire screen so far. Then you'll get a little this confusion. Okay, so we are back here. As you saw, we actually removed the role from Philip, but he now can update. Now let's see what happens if we are changing the schema. Let's go to analyst and also do not allow them to update dashboard. As you can see here, if we'll do the check now, Philip is denied. Here, we change the schema. This is something that we do with the software development lifecycle. This is something that sometimes our product manager will do. This is something that is schema is part of the software delivery, and this is part of the data. This is dynamic with the software. Let's think, for example, what happened. Let's add event handler a resource on a specific tenant. Let's take event handler, and for example, let's take the default tenant and give Istas access to the dashboard resource instance of dashboard 1. Resource role is event handler. What happened now? The data is updated. Now, event handler has permissions to dashboard 1, and let's try to check if it has permissions to change dashboard 1. So I'll use the tuple convention. If you can see the dash here, I use the tuple convention. And sorry, I use the column convent, the tuple. I use the column to call the particular dashboard. So I'm checking if they have dashboard 1. And we can see, okay, I checked Philip. I want to check event handler. And we can see that is denied. Why is that denied? It's a combination of a policy and data. It has a role here, but the policy does not allow them. Now let's see the relationship magic in live. So we want to check if they can update the dashboard, not the dashboard, the widget. So I'm removing, let's call it dashboard 1 widget. And here I'm removing the dashboard and I'm writing widget. And here, if I'm trying, so look at this one. We get a derivation, we get a combination of data and policy that is derived permissions for event handler to update the widget. Event handler can't update the dashboard, they can update the widget. So in the enforcement phase, in the third phase of the enforcement, this is where the beauty of the schema and the data is getting together to get better decisions. I see that we are exactly finishing our hours. There are two very important things when you are actually doing authorization that we haven't got in this hour. The deployment, how do you deploy the PDP, how you deploy it across the multiple services that you have, and of course auditing, monitoring, observe the policy decision. They are all super important in your plan to adopt policies. I remind you that we already here, if you just want to get a one-on-one minute meeting with us, we'll always love to do that, help you to model policies, help you to configure policy. I'll put here the Calendly link on the screen for a second, so you can, if you want to have a meeting with a permit, you can just set a meeting with you. While I'm taking this, while I'm giving you this link, if anyone has any question, I want to remind you we are listening to you, no matter if you are watching us in YouTube, you're watching us in LinkedIn, watching us on Twitter. We are here and we want to hear your questions. So if you have any question about framework of adopting fine-grained authorization, the new pricing tier, whatever it is, just drop your question, set an intro meeting. I'm putting the
And
link.
if anything comes up that might pop into your head, and you're like, oh, actually, I want to know this, and it's past this live stream, and there's no more place to ask questions, make sure you also join our Slack. And at some point, Gabriel will put it up on the screen as well. After the meet, oh, I see he just changed it to the meeting. But
I can do too.
Amazing.
So we have here also the Slack and the intro meeting. Let's keep it. I really don't like live streams to take more than what we plan, so I'll keep it like in really 1 minute. If you have any questions, I'll drop it now. If you plan to ask any short, just say I have a question. Then we know to wait. But Philip, do you have any words to conclude this live stream?
I think it's interesting what we're doing here. In general, I'm always very, very kind of impressed with our team and the things we come up with. And I hope that it's actually something that you guys will have a go with and implement and give us your feedback. We're always looking for feedback of how you think the tool works, what you think could be done better, what you like. We also like compliments. So if you want to give those to us, I will happily take them. Anyhow, I think we can just wrap up now. So for whoever was on this live stream, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us and to listen to some latest updates from Permit. And I think we can wrap up, right, Gabriel?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for anyone joined. Thank you for Philip to joining me.